the hollow choir. The rain fell in sheets, a cold, relentless curtain that blurred the world beyond the windshield of Daniel's old pickup truck. The wipers squeaked rhythmically, fighting a losing battle against the downpour as he navigated the winding back roads of rural Vermont. It was well past midnight, and the only light came from his headlights, slicing through the dark like a blade. He hadn't seen another car for miles, and the isolation was starting to gnaw at him. Daniel was a freelance journalist, chasing stories that others dismissed as folklore or madness. His latest lead had brought him here, to a forgotten corner of the state where locals whispered of strange occurrences, disappearances, unexplained noises, and sightings of figures that didn't quite belong. He'd heard the rumors in a dingy bar 2 towns over. Children, they said, with eyes like voids, appearing at the edges of the woods, singing songs that no one could quite remember, but couldn't forget. The bartender had warned him to stay away, his voice low and trembling. "They ain't kids," he'd said, his eyes darting to the door. "There's something else." Daniel didn't believe in ghosts or monsters, but he believed in stories. And stories like this, raw, primal, steeped in fierce old papers. So here he was, driving through a storm, chasing a tale that might just be the break he needed. His phone had lost signal an hour ago, and the GPS was useless, looping him through the same stretch of road, lined with gnarled pines and sagging fences. He cursed under his breath, glancing at the dashboard clock. 1:37 a.m. That's when he saw them dotted first. He thought it was a trick of the rain, a distortion in the headlight's beam. But as he slowed the truck, the shapes became clearer. 3 small figures standing by the roadside, motionless, their heads bowed as if in prayer. They were children, no older than 10 or 12, dressed in outdated clothes, frayed jackets, patched trousers, a dress that looked like it belonged in a museum. Their hair was plastered to their faces by the rain, and they stood so still they might have been statues. Daniel's stomach twisted. Something about them felt wrong. He couldn't place it, but the sight of them sent a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the gear. Every instinct screamed at him to keep driving, to pretend he hadn't seen them. But they were just kids, weren't they? Kids, stranded in a storm in the middle of nowhere. He couldn't just leave them. He rolled down the window, the rain spattering his face. "Hey," he called, his voice swallowed by the wind. "Kids, okay, need a ride?" They didn't move, didn't speak. The rain hissed against the asphalt, and the silence stretched until it felt like a weight pressing down on him. Then, slowly, the child in the middle, a girl with long dark hair, lifted her head. Her face was pale, almost luminescent in the headlights, and her eyes, God, her eyes. They were black, not just dark, but black like twin pools of ink. No whites, no irises, just an endless void that seemed to pull at him, tugging at something deep inside his mind. Daniel froze, his heart pounded, a primal rhythm that drowned out the rain. The girl's lips parted, and she spoke, her voice soft but unnaturally clear, cutting through the storm like a blade. "We're cold," she said, "let us in." The other 2 children raised their heads, and Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Their eyes were the same, black, hollow, endless. They didn't blink, didn't flinch as the rain stung their faces. They just stared, their gazes locking onto him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "A cot," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't have room." "Let us in," the girl said again, her voice unchanged. But there was something else now, a faint hum, like the drone of a distant choir, rising from the darkness behind them. It wasn't a sound he heard with his ears. It was inside his head, vibrating in his skull, pulling at his thoughts like fingers prying open a wound. He slammed his foot on the gas, the truck lurching forward. The children didn't move, didn't chase him, but their eyes followed him, burning into his mind even as the truck roared down the road. He didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. He didn't want to know if they were still there. By the time Daniel reached the nearest town, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip the steering wheel. The town was little more than a gas station, a diner, and a cluster of weathered houses. But the sight of lights and signs of life was enough to steady him. He pulled into the diner's parking lot, the neon sign flickering open 24 hours. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and grease, and a lone waitress glanced up from wiping down the counter. "You look like hell," she said, her voice gruff but not unkind. "Storm chase you in?" Daniel forced a laugh, though it came out more like a choke. "Something like that." He slid into a booth, his wet clothes sticking to the vinyl seat. "You ever hear anything weird around here? About kids, maybe, out in the woods?" The waitress's expression changed, her eyes narrowing. "You saw them, didn't you?" she asked, her voice low. "Saw who?" Daniel's mouth went dry. She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "The choir. That's what folks call them. Kids with eyes like night. They show up when the storms come, singing songs that stick in your head. People who let them in, they don't come back the same. If they come back at all." Daniel's stomach churned. "What are they?" She shook her head, glancing toward the window, as if expecting to see them standing outside. "No one knows. Some say they're ghosts. Others say they're something older, something that's been here longer than the trees or the hills. All I know is, you don't let them in, no matter what they say, no matter how much they beg." He wanted to dismiss it as superstition, but the memory of those eyes, those endless, depthless eyes made his skin prickle. "I didn't let them in," he said, more to himself than to her. "I drove away." "Good," she said, but her eyes were wary. "You keep driving. Don't stop till you're far from here." Daniel didn't sleep that night. He checked into a motel, the kind with flickering lights and stains on the carpet. But even with the door locked and the curtains drawn, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The hum was still there, faint but persistent, like a song he couldn't unhear. He tried to write it off as exhaustion, but every time he closed his eyes, he saw those children, their black gazes boring into him. The next morning, he called his editor Sarah and told her he was scrapping the story. "It's nothing," he lied. "Just local ghost stories, not worth the ink." Sarah wasn't convinced. "You sound off. Dan, you sure you're okay?" "I'm fine," he said, too quickly. "Just tired. I'm heading home." But he didn't go home. He couldn't. The hum in his head was louder now, and it wasn't just a sound. It was words, fragments of a melody that twisted through his thoughts like smoke. "Come to us. Let us in." He tried to drown it out with music, with the radio, with anything, but it was always there, growing stronger with every mile he drove. By the third day, he was seeing them everywhere. In the shadows of gas stations, at the edges of parking lots, in the reflection of his rearview mirror. Always three of them, always silent, their black eyes following him. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating. His hands shook as he gripped the wheel, his vision blurring from exhaustion and fear. He ended up in a library in a small town, desperate for answers. The librarian, an elderly woman with a kind but weary face, listened as he stammered out his story. When he mentioned the children, her expression darkened. "You heard the choir," she said, her voice trembling. "They don't just want you to let them in, they want you to join them." "Join them?" Daniel's voice cracked. "What does that mean?" She hesitated, then led him to a back room filled with dusty archives. She pulled out a leather-bound book, its pages yellowed and brittle. "This town's got a history," she said. "Back in the 1800s, there was a preacher who came through here. He called himself the Shepherd, said he could save people from their sins by leading them to the true choir. Families followed him into the woods hall, families, kids and all. None of them came back." Daniel's throat tightened. "What happened to them?" "No one knows," she said. "But the storms started after that. And the children, they'd been here ever since, singing their song. Those who hear it, they don't last long." She opened the book, showing him a faded sketch. It was crude, but unmistakable. 3 children, their eyes black voids, their mouths open in a silent scream. Below the sketch was a single line, written in trembling script. "The hollow choir takes what it wants." Daniel didn't want to believe it, but the hum in his head was undeniable now. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence, a weight that pressed against his thoughts, eroding his will. He saw the children every night, closer each time. They didn't speak anymore, but their eyes said enough. "Let us in, let us in." He tried to run, driving from town to town, but they were always there, waiting. In the rain, in the fog, in the quiet moments when the world was still, he started hearing their voices in his dreams, soft, childlike, but wrong. Like a choir singing in a language no one should know. One night, he woke to find them standing at the foot of his bed. The motel room was dark, the air thick with the smell of rain and something else, something metallic, like blood. The girl in the middle stepped forward, her black eyes gleaming in the faint light from the window. "We're cold," she said, her voice a whisper that echoed in his skull. "Let us in," Daniel screamed, scrambling back against the headboard. But they didn't move, didn't blink. They just stood there, their heads tilted slightly, as if listening to something he couldn't hear. The hum in his head swelled, drowning out his thoughts, his fear, his sense of self. It was a song now, a melody that wrapped around him like chains, pulling him toward something he couldn't see but could feel, a vast, empty darkness that hungered for him. He doesn't remember what happened next, not clearly. There was a flash of movement, a sound like tearing fabric, and then silence. When he awoke, he was in his truck, parked on a dirt road he didn't recognize. The rain had stopped, and the air was still, heavy with the scent of pine and decay. His hands were stained with something dark, something that was a mud dot. He drove. He didn't know where he was going, but he drove, the hum in his head guiding him like a compass. The children were gone, but he could feel them, their presence lingering in the corners of his mind. He saw signs for towns he'd never heard of, roads that didn't exist on any map. And then, one night, he saw the lights. They were faint at first, flickering through the trees like fireflies, but as he followed them, they grew brighter, leading him to a clearing deep in the woods. There, in the center, was a church hall, what was left of it. The walls were blackened, the roof collapsed, but the steeple still stood, leaning like a broken finger pointing at the sky. And they were there. Not just 3, but dozens children, their eyes black and endless, their mouths moving in unison as they sang. The sound was beautiful and terrible, a chorus of voices that weren't human, weren't alive, but something else entirely. Daniel's knees buckled, and he fell to the ground, the hum in his head joining their song, blending with it until he couldn't tell where he ended and they began. The girl from the road stepped forward, her pale face serene. "You let us in," she said, her voice soft but triumphant. "Now you're home." Daniel tried to scream, but no sound came. His body moved without his will, stepping forward to join the circle of children. Their hands reached for him, cold and unyielding, pulling him into their ranks. The song grew louder, filling the clearing, filling the world, until there was nothing else. No one knows what happened to Daniel. His truck was found abandoned on a back road, the driver's seat stained with something the police couldn't identify. His notes, scattered across the passenger seat, were filled with frantic scribbles, words that didn't make sense, drawings of eyes that seemed to watch from the page. The locals didn't talk about it, didn't mention the church in the woods, or the children who sang in the storms. But the storms still come. And when they do, the woods grow quiet, save for a faint hum, a melody that lingers in the air like a promise. If you're ever out there, driving alone at night, and you see them 3 children by the roadside, their eyes black as the void, don't stop, don't look, just drive, and pray you don't hear the song, because once you do, it never stops, and they'll find you, no matter how far you run.